The alarm on my console screamed before I even understood what it meant. Red light flooded the bridge of the Ashra's reach, and every officer around me froze for half a second, the way people do when something breaks a rule they never expected to be tested. My name is Caliph Vor, and at that time I was young, proud, and certain that I understood the galaxy better than the old officers who trained me. I had grown up hearing one phrase over and over, whispered by elders, printed in old manuals, repeated by every captain who had ever commanded a ship near human territory. Never defy humanity. It sounded like a superstition to me, a story told to keep young officers cautious. I did not believe it, not really. Not until the day everything changed. We were a survey vessel of the Zarn Coalition, a union of many species spread across a wide stretch of stars. We were not warriors. We were explorers, traders, scientists. Our ship carried scanning equipment, not serious weapons. Our captain, a steady old coalition officer named Vesa Kor, had served for decades and rarely raised her voice. She had seen things I had not. She carried a kind of caution that I mistook for fear. That day, we picked up a distress signal. A single ship, drifting, damaged, alone in neutral space between 3 trade routes. Our sensors identified it immediately. Human design, a trading vessel, old model, engines cold, life support barely holding on. The moment the signal appeared on our screen, the temperature on the bridge seemed to drop, even though nothing physical had changed. I watched Captain Kor's shoulders tighten. I watched our navigator glance toward the captain instead of toward the controls. Even Dros Kellen, our political officer, went quiet for a moment, though not for long. "That is a human ship," said our sensor officer, a young coalition member named Torv, his voice careful. "I can read a scan as well as you can," Captain Kor answered. Her tone was flat, controlled, but I noticed her hand rest on the edge of her console, fingers pressed down like she was holding something steady. I looked at the image on the main display. The ship was small, old, damaged along one side, drifting with no visible escort, no visible defense. It looked exactly like every story I had heard about humans described them. Weak, fragile, biologically unremarkable, without claws, without venom, without the natural strength that many coalition species possessed. I had studied their biology in school. Humans were, on paper, one of the least physically impressive species in known space. No natural armor, no enhanced senses, nothing that should inspire the kind of caution I saw radiating from every experienced officer on that bridge. "Do we have any record of previous encounters with human vessels in this sector?" Captain Kor asked, her eyes still fixed on the display. "None logged," Torv answered. "This would be a first contact scenario for our crew specifically. Coalition Central Command has records, but they are restricted." "Restricted," I repeated, unable to hide the disbelief in my voice. "Restricted from a survey crew. Why would basic contact history be restricted?" Dros Kellen, the political officer, straightened in his seat, sensing an opportunity the way he always did. He was ambitious, hungry for recognition, always looking for a way to advance his career through some bold decision that would get noticed by the Coalition Senate. "Because the Senate does not want lower-ranking crews making decisions based on old fears," he said. "Directive Zero has kept the Coalition passive near human territory for over a century. It is time someone questioned whether that caution is still necessary." Captain Kor turned her head slowly toward him. "Directive Zero is not a suggestion, Kellen. It is the single most enforced rule in Coalition law. Never approach a human vessel with hostile intent. Never board without invitation. Never detain a human crew member. Never test them." "We are not testing anyone," Kellen said smoothly. "We are answering a distress signal. That is simple courtesy between civilized species." I found myself agreeing with him, though I said nothing yet. The ship on our screen looked helpless. No weapons fire. No shields active. No visible crew moving on external cameras. If this was humanity's legendary danger, it certainly did not look like much from where I stood. "Scan their communications," Captain Kor ordered. "Let us hear what they are actually saying before anyone decides anything." Torv adjusted his console, and a moment later a voice came through our speakers. It was calm. Too calm, I thought at the time, for someone supposedly in distress. A man's voice, steady, almost polite. "This is Trading Vessel Halden's Way, requesting non-interference and basic system diagnostics only. We do not require boarding assistance. Repeat, we do not require boarding assistance. Any vessel receiving this signal, please maintain standard distance protocol." I remember laughing quietly to myself. They are refusing help while sending a distress signal. That makes no sense. "It makes perfect sense," Captain Kor said, though she did not explain further. She simply stared at the screen, her jaw tight. Kellen leaned forward. "Or it means they are hiding something, perhaps illegal cargo. Perhaps advanced technology they do not want inspected. This is exactly the kind of situation the Senate wants documented. If we make peaceful contact, offer aid, and observe their technology firsthand, we could bring back information that benefits the entire coalition. Or we could bring back nothing at all," Captain Kor muttered, almost too quiet for anyone but me to hear. I want to be honest about who I was that day, because it matters for what happened after. I was not cruel. I was not looking to harm anyone. I simply did not believe the warnings. I thought caution had curdled into fear, and fear had curdled into myth, and somewhere along the way, an entire coalition of powerful species had convinced themselves that one small, biologically ordinary species deserved to be treated like a hidden god. I thought it was foolish. I thought someone needed to prove it wrong. So when Kellen turned to me and asked what I thought, I did not hesitate. "I think we should render aid," I said. "If they refuse boarding, we simply observe from a distance and offer supplies. There is no harm in that." Captain Kor looked at me for a long moment. There was something in her expression that I did not understand then, but understand completely now. It was not anger. It was not disappointment. It was something closer to grief, the kind of look someone gives a person who is about to learn something the hard way. "Caliph," she said quietly, "do you know why Directive Zero exists?" "Old fear," I said. "A story passed down from a time when the Coalition first met humans and misunderstood them." "No," she said. "It exists because the Coalition did understand them. That is exactly why it exists." I did not know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. Kellen, sensing the moment slipping away from his ambition, spoke again, louder this time, addressing the whole bridge crew. "Captain, with respect, the Senate placed me on this ship to observe operational decisions and report back on Coalition readiness near human territory. If we simply drift past a damaged vessel without even attempting basic contact, that will be seen as excessive caution bordering on cowardice. I am formally requesting that we move to intercept and offer direct assistance." The bridge went quiet. I watched Captain Kor's hands tighten once more on the edge of her console. She looked at the view screen, at the small drifting human ship, and I saw something pass behind her eyes that looked almost like resignation. "Formally requesting," she repeated, "which means you are invoking Senate authority over my command." "I am," Kellen said, and I could hear the pride in his voice, the confidence of a man who believed he was about to make history. Captain Kor closed her eyes for one long second. When she opened them again, her voice was different, quieter, almost mechanical, like someone reciting words she had hoped never to need. "Log my objection," she said to Torv. "Full record, time-stamped, my name attached. Note that I advised against intercept and boarding of the vessel, designated Halden's Way, citing Directive Zero." "Objection logged," Torv said, his voice unsteady. "Helm," Captain Kor said, turning to face forward again. "Bring us alongside the human vessel. Slow approach. Do not power weapons. Do not lock any targeting systems. Prepare a small boarding team, non-lethal equipment only." I felt a rush of excitement I am not proud of now. I thought I was about to prove something. I thought I was about to show the entire coalition that the old fears were nothing more than shadows, and that humanity, for all its reputation, was simply another species drifting through the same dark space as the rest of us, vulnerable, ordinary, and no different from anyone else. I did not know, as our ship began its slow approach, that the human vessel had been drifting exactly where it was for a very specific reason. I did not know that its damage was carefully staged, that its engines were not truly dead, that its crew was not panicking behind those quiet walls. I did not know that the calm voice we heard over our communications was not the voice of someone afraid, but the voice of someone who had done this before, someone following a plan that had already been rehearsed 100 times across 100 different encounters with 100 different curious, prideful, doubtful species just like mine. I did not know that we were not rescuing anyone. I did not know that we were the ones being tested. As our shuttle bay opened and my small boarding team prepared their gear, I looked one last time at Captain Core, sitting rigid in her chair, staring at the human ship with an expression I finally understood only much later. It was the look of someone who had seen this exact moment before, in training simulations, in old reports, in whispered warnings from officers who had barely survived to pass the story along. She was not afraid of the humans attacking us. She was afraid of what would happen after we gave them a reason to respond. I strapped into my seat on the shuttle, checked my equipment, and gave the order to launch. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with the thrill of being the one who finally proved the old stories wrong. I had no idea that within the hour I would understand exactly why every single officer before me had chosen silence over pride, caution over curiosity, and distance over defiance. The shuttle doors closed. The stars outside blurred as we moved toward the drifting human vessel. And somewhere behind that ship's quiet, damaged hull, something was already watching us, patient and unbothered, waiting to see exactly how far we were willing to go. The shuttle bay doors sealed shut behind us the moment we crossed into the human vessel, and the sound of it locking sent a small chill through me that I chose to ignore. My team consisted of 4 coalition members besides myself, all trained in standard boarding procedure, all carrying equipment meant for scanning and light restraint rather than anything more serious. We were not soldiers. We were surveyors with permission to act like soldiers for one afternoon, and I walked through that airlock believing I was in complete control of the situation. The interior of the ship surprised me immediately, though I did not admit it out loud. I had expected chaos, sparks, emergency lighting, crew members running in panic. Instead, I found quiet, clean corridors, dim lighting that looked intentional rather than damaged, and a strange, steady hum coming from systems that should have been failing according to our scans. This does not match the distress profile. Torv's voice came through my earpiece from the Ashra's reach. Structural damage readings are inconsistent with visible wear. Maybe their scanners misread the damage, I said, though even as I said it, doubt crept into my chest for the first time. We moved deeper into the ship, weapons ready but lowered, following the corridor toward what our scans identified as the main control room. I remember the silence most of all, not the silence of a dying ship, but the silence of a place that had been prepared, arranged, waiting. When we reached the control room, a single man stood there, alone, hands resting calmly at his sides. He looked young, maybe in his early 30s, with short brown hair and steady gray eyes that showed no fear at all. His name tag read Owen Hale, stitched neatly into a uniform that looked far too clean for a ship supposedly falling apart. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice exactly as calm as it had been over the communications channel. "I did ask that you maintain distance." "We are here to render assistance," I said, stepping forward with more confidence than I truly felt. "Your ship is damaged. We intend to help and to verify the condition of your systems." Owen Hale looked at me, then at the 4 coalition members behind me, then back at me again. There was no hostility in his expression. If anything, there was something closer to disappointment, the same look Captain Core had given me back on the bridge. "You should not have boarded," he said simply. "That decision was not yours to make alone, and it was not mine to prevent, once you chose it. But I want you to understand something before you go any further. Everything that happens next is a direct result of that choice, not mine." I laughed, though it came out more nervous than I intended. "Are you threatening us?" "No," he said. "I am informing you. There is a difference, and I think you will understand that difference very soon." I decided his calm was simply human confidence, a performance meant to intimidate us into leaving empty-handed. I was not going to allow that. I ordered 2 of my team members to begin scanning the ship's core systems, hoping to gather technical data that would prove useful back home. I ordered another to secure the room, and I personally approached Owen Hale, intending to question him about the ship's true condition. "Your engines," I said. "Our scans show them cold, yet this room is running on full power. Explain the discrepancy." "I could," he said, "but I do not think you would believe the explanation yet. Try me." He tilted his head slightly, studying me the way someone studies an animal they respect, but do not fear. "This ship is not in distress. It never was, not really. It is part of a quiet route along a boundary line that your coalition agreed to respect a long time ago, back when your leaders signed Directive 0. We do not patrol with weapons pointed outward. We patrol quietly, and we watch to see who respects the boundary and who does not." I felt my confidence slipping, but pride held me in place. "That sounds like a convenient story to protect a weak ship from being properly inspected." "It is not a story," he said, "but I understand why it sounds like one to you." Behind me, one of my team members called out that the ship's internal systems were refusing standard access protocols, locking automatically whenever they attempted deeper scans. I ordered them to override the locks manually, assuming it was simply unfamiliar human technology reacting poorly to our equipment. "You should stop that," Owen Hale said, his tone still calm but firmer now. "Overriding those locks will be recorded as an intentional action, not an accident. Right now, everything that has happened could still be explained as an overzealous rescue attempt. Forcing those systems changes that entirely." I hesitated for half a second, but Kellen's ambition echoed in my mind, along with my own desire to bring back something meaningful from this encounter. I gave the order to continue. "Continue the override," I said. "We need this data." Owen Hale did not argue further. He simply closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if marking the exact instant something changed, and then opened them again, with an expression that had shifted from calm to something quieter, almost sorrowful. "Understood," he said softly, more to himself than to me. I ordered my team to secure him in place, believing that keeping the only visible crew member contained would prevent any interference while we completed our inspection. 2 of my team moved to guide him aside. He did not resist, did not raise his voice. He simply allowed it, watching me the entire time with that same steady patience. "You do understand," he said as they moved him toward a side room, "that this changes what today is classified as. This is no longer a rescue. This is now a boarding conducted under pressure, against a cooperative human crew member, without full consent. We will explain the circumstances to your authorities," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, they sounded weaker than I intended. "You will not need to explain anything," he said. "They already know." I did not understand what he meant by that until much later. At the time, I dismissed it as another attempt to unsettle us. I turned my attention back to the ship's systems, eager to recover whatever technology might justify the risk we had taken. My team worked quickly, pulling data from consoles that seemed almost too willing to give up information, as if the ship wanted us to see everything it contained. That should have been my second warning. It was not. We gathered readings on propulsion systems, communication arrays, and structural materials, all of it feeling like an easy victory. I remember feeling proud, imagining how this data would be received back on the Ashra's Reach, how Kellen would take credit for authorizing the mission, how I might finally be seen as someone willing to challenge outdated caution instead of simply obeying it. It was during this moment of quiet celebration that Torv's voice broke through my earpiece again, this time edged with unmistakable alarm. "Caliph, we have a problem. Multiple contacts just decloaked outside the human vessel. 3 ships, human design, positioned directly around our position. They were here before we arrived. They were already here." My chest tightened. Define already here. Their sensor signatures show minimal power emission, consistent with vessels that had been stationary and silent for an extended period, possibly hours before our arrival. They were not responding to our approach. They were waiting for it. I turned back toward the side room where Owen Hale had been placed and found him sitting calmly, watching me through the open doorway with an expression that finally made the weight of the situation settle fully into my chest. "You knew," I said. "You knew they were already here." "Of course I did," he said. "This entire encounter was never truly about a damaged ship. It was about seeing what a coalition crew would do when given the opportunity to ignore an old rule. Most crews pass. They keep their distance, offer remote assistance, and move on without incident. That has happened many times before, quietly, without anyone outside ever knowing a test occurred at all." "And if a crew does not pass?" I asked, though part of me did not want to hear the answer. "Then everyone learns exactly why the rule exists," he said, "not through anger, through something far more effective, through consequence." I felt the mag clamps engage along the outer hull before Torv even confirmed it over the comm. A dull, metallic sound rippled through the corridor, and I understood immediately that our shuttle, the one we had used to board this ship so confidently only minutes earlier, was no longer able to leave. "Our shuttle is locked in place," I said quietly, more to myself than to anyone else. "Yes," Owen Hale said, his voice gentle, almost kind, in a way that somehow made the moment worse rather than better. "It has been locked since the moment your team began forcing access to systems that were never offered to you. Everything after that point was simply a formality." I stood there in that quiet corridor, surrounded by systems we had no right to touch, beside a man we had detained without full cause, while outside the hull 3 human vessels waited in complete silence, patient and unbothered, exactly as Captain Core had feared they would be from the very beginning. I finally understood, standing in that corridor, that we had not stumbled into a rescue mission at all. We had walked directly into the one situation every experienced coalition officer had spent their entire career trying to avoid, and there was no way to undo the choices that had brought us there. Back aboard the Ashra's Reach, the bridge had gone completely silent. I could hear it through my earpiece even before Torv patched me in fully, that particular kind of silence that only happens when experienced people suddenly realize they are no longer in control of a situation they thought they understood. "Calith," Captain Core's voice came through, low and steady despite everything. "Report your status." "We are secure inside the human vessel," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "We have gathered technical data and detained 1 crew member for questioning. However, 3 additional human ships have appeared outside our position, and our shuttle appears to be locked in place." There was a pause, long enough that I began to wonder if the connection had failed. Then Captain Core spoke again, her voice carrying a weight I had never heard from her before. "Release the crew member immediately," she said. "Do not touch anything else. Do not resist if they attempt to remove your team from that vessel. Do you understand me, Calith?" "Captain, we still have time to complete the—" "There is no more time," she said, cutting me off sharply. "There was never as much time as you believe there was. Release him now." I looked toward the side room where Owen Hale sat, still calm, still watching everything unfold with an expression of quiet patience rather than anger. I ordered my team to release him. He stood slowly, rubbing his wrists where the restraint had been, though not with any real discomfort, more out of habit than necessity. "Thank you," he said simply, as if I had done nothing more than return a borrowed item on time. "That decision will be noted." "Noted by whom?" I asked. "By the people who are about to have a conversation with your captain," he said. "The same people who have already had this conversation more times than you would believe possible, with more crews than you would want to know about." Before I could respond, Torv's voice returned to my earpiece, tighter now, faster. "Calith, our engines just went offline. Weapons systems are unresponsive. Communications array is switching to an unfamiliar frequency without our authorization." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Define unfamiliar. Define unauthorized. I mean, someone else is controlling our own systems right now, and it is not us. I turned to Owen Hale, who was watching me with an expression that held no satisfaction, no triumph, only a kind of tired familiarity, as though he had seen this exact reaction on 100 other faces before mine. "How is that possible?" I asked. "Your ship has not fired a single weapon. Nothing has physically touched our vessel." "It does not need to," he said. "Most of your coalition ships were purchased or licensed using equipment originally supplied by human manufacturers, decades ago, back when trade agreements were still being established between our peoples. That equipment was labeled civilian grade. It was cheaper, more efficient, and widely adopted across almost every species in your coalition because it worked well and caused no problems for a very long time. You are saying our own ship's systems were built with hidden human technology inside them." "I am saying exactly that," he said. "Fail-safes, quiet and dormant, present in almost everything your coalition uses today, never activated because there was never a reason to activate them, until now." I felt the floor of my confidence crack completely at that moment. Every proud thought I had carried onto that ship, every dismissive comment I had made about old fears and outdated caution, came rushing back to me with a very different weight. "You planned this from the very beginning," I said. "Every part of it, the distress signal, the damage, the calm voice, all of it, designed to see exactly how far we would go." "Not designed for you specifically," Owen Hale said, his tone gentle, almost regretful. "Designed as a boundary, tested occasionally, by whichever crew happens to wander close enough and choose curiosity over caution. Most choose caution. It has been a long time since anyone chose otherwise." I did not know what to say to that. I thought of Captain Core's face when she first saw the human vessel on our screen, the way her hand had pressed down against her console, as though bracing for exactly this outcome. I thought of the old warnings I had dismissed as myth, whispered stories passed down through generations of coalition officers who understood something I had refused to believe. Through my earpiece, I heard Kellen's voice, for the first time since the encounter had begun, and it no longer carried the confidence it once had. "Captain, contact the human vessels immediately. Offer a formal apology on behalf of the Coalition Senate. Offer reparations for any inconvenience caused." "They are not interested in apologies right now," Captain Core said, her voice tight. "They are interested in whether we understand what just happened." "This is absurd," Kellen said, though his voice wavered. "We are a coalition vessel. We have rights under interspecies law. They cannot simply disable our ship without formal justification." "They already have justification," Captain Core said. "You gave it to them the moment you ordered a boarding against my direct objection." I stood in that quiet human corridor, listening to my own captain and political officer argue over a decision that could no longer be undone, while Owen Hale watched me with patient, steady eyes, waiting to see what I would do next. "What happens now?" I asked him quietly. "Now," he said, "your captain speaks with someone who has been waiting for this exact conversation, and you, Caliph, get to decide whether you spend the next few hours arguing that you did nothing wrong, or accepting that you did, and asking what comes next instead." I did not answer immediately. Pride is a strange thing. Even standing in the middle of undeniable proof that I had misjudged everything, some small part of me still wanted to argue, still wanted to insist that our intentions had been reasonable, that curiosity was not a crime, that humanity's response felt excessive compared to the size of our mistake. But another part of me, quieter and more honest, remembered Captain Core's face on the bridge, the grief hidden behind her calm expression, the years of experience that had taught her exactly how this moment would unfold, long before it happened. She had not been afraid of humans attacking us. She had been afraid of us giving them a reason to respond, because she understood something I had refused to accept until this very moment. Humanity did not need to attack first. They simply needed to wait, patiently, for someone foolish enough to test them and then respond with a precision that made violence unnecessary. "I understand," I finally said to Owen Hale, though the words felt heavier leaving my mouth than any words I had spoken before. "I understand that we made a mistake." He nodded slowly, and for the first time since we had boarded his ship, Something that might have been approval crossed his expression. "That is further than most people get on their first attempt," he said. "Let us see how the rest of this conversation goes." Outside, through the narrow viewport of the corridor, I could see the 3 human ships holding perfectly still, patient and silent, waiting to see exactly what kind of crew we truly were, now that pride had finally given way to understanding. The Ashra's reach drifted in silence, engines cold, weapons unresponsive, every system that once made us feel powerful now sitting quiet and useless around us. I made my way back through the docking corridor toward my own ship, escorted by no one, restrained by no one, simply allowed to walk back the way we had come, as though the humans had already decided we posed no further threat worth watching closely. When I stepped back onto the bridge of the Ashra's reach, the atmosphere had changed completely from the confident tension of only an hour earlier. Every console showed the same message, a simple text overlay that had replaced our standard interface entirely. It read only, "Systems suspended pending resolution," and beneath it, a single contact channel, open and waiting. Captain Core sat in her chair, hands folded tightly in her lap, watching the main screen where a woman's face had appeared, calm, professional, and utterly unbothered by the situation unfolding around her. Her name tag, visible on the uniform collar just below the frame of the video feed, read Ellen Marsh. "Captain Core," Ellen Marsh said, her voice carrying the same unshakable calm that Owen Hale had shown us aboard the drifting vessel. "I want to begin by saying this conversation does not need to be difficult, provided everyone involved is honest about what happened today." "We understand," Captain Core said carefully. "I logged my objection to the boarding before it occurred. That objection is on record." "I am aware," Ellen Marsh said. "We received a copy of that log the moment your officer initiated contact with our vessel. We do keep track of these things, Captain, perhaps more closely than your coalition realizes." I felt Kellen shift uncomfortably beside me, his earlier confidence completely gone, replaced by something closer to quiet panic. He opened his mouth as though preparing another attempt at diplomacy, but Captain Core raised a hand slightly, silencing him before he could speak. "What are the terms of resolution?" Captain Core asked directly. Ellen Marsh studied the captain for a moment, then glanced briefly toward something off-screen before returning her attention to us. "There are no punitive terms today," she said. "Your systems will be restored once this conversation concludes. No damage has been done to your vessel, and no harm has come to your crew. This was never meant to be a punishment. It was meant to be a demonstration." "A demonstration of what?" Kellen finally said, unable to stay silent any longer, though his voice lacked its usual arrogance. Ellen Marsh turned her attention toward him directly, and though her expression remained calm, something in her eyes carried a weight that made even me feel the full seriousness of the moment. "A demonstration of exactly how far humanity's patience extends, and exactly how quickly that patience becomes irrelevant once boundaries are ignored. Your officer ordered a boarding against Captain Core's direct objection. Your crew forced access to systems that were never offered. Your team detained a human crew member without justification. Every one of those actions, individually, might be explained away as poor judgment. Together, they form a pattern our monitoring systems are specifically designed to recognize." "And if we had not released him," I asked quietly, unable to stop the question from leaving my mouth, "what would have happened then?" Ellen Marsh looked directly at me through the screen, and for the first time, I understood exactly why Captain Core had feared this outcome from the very beginning. There was no anger in her expression, no cruelty, only a quiet, absolute certainty that unsettled me far more than shouting ever could have. "Then this conversation would be very different," she said simply. "We do not retaliate with force as a first response, Officer Vor. We retaliate with consequence. Trade routes quietly closed, technology licenses revoked without explanation. Support systems, medical or otherwise, withdrawn from regions that depend on them, all without a single weapon ever being fired. Humanity discovered a long time ago that violence is expensive, unpredictable, and often unnecessary, when patience and precision achieve the same result with far less cost. Kellen's face had gone pale by this point, and I understood why. He had pushed for this encounter believing it would demonstrate strength to the Coalition Senate. Instead, it had demonstrated something else entirely, a kind of restraint so complete and so deliberate that it felt more unsettling than any display of force could have been. "We would like to formally apologize," Captain Core said, her voice steady despite everything, "and to ask what steps the Coalition should take to ensure this does not happen again." Ellen Marsh nodded slowly. "Educate your officers properly," she said, "not through fear, but through honest history. Directive Zero exists because humanity survived circumstances your species have never had to face. Our homeworld taught us patience through scarcity, and it taught us precision through necessity. We do not advertise our capabilities because we prefer quiet stability over constant demonstrations of strength. But we will always respond, calmly and completely, whenever that stability is tested." I found myself speaking again before I fully decided to. Why show restraint at all? If your capabilities are as complete as you describe, why not simply enforce Directive Zero through fear instead of patience? Ellen Marsh's expression softened slightly, and for the first time since the conversation began, something that resembled genuine warmth crossed her face. "Because fear creates enemies, Officer Vor. Respect creates partners. We have spent generations building quiet trust across this galaxy, one careful interaction at a time. It would be far easier to rule through intimidation. It would also be far less stable and far less worth building. We choose patience because the alternative costs more than any of us are willing to pay, including you." The bridge remained silent for a long moment after she finished speaking. I looked toward Captain Core, who seemed almost relieved despite everything, as though a weight she had carried for years had finally been acknowledged rather than dismissed. "Your systems will be restored now," Ellen Marsh said, glancing briefly off-screen once more. "This encounter will be logged as resolved without further action, provided no additional incidents occur before you leave this sector." "Thank you," Captain Core said quietly. "One more thing," Ellen Marsh added, her attention shifting directly toward Dros Kellen, who visibly straightened under the weight of her gaze. "Your Senate will receive a full report of today's events, including your specific role in authorizing this boarding against direct command objection. What they choose to do with that information is entirely their decision, not ours." Kellen opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. I watched the color drain further from his face, as he realized exactly what consequence awaited him back home, a consequence far more immediate and far more personal than anything the humans themselves had chosen to enforce. The screen went dark, and a moment later, our systems flickered back to life around us, engines humming, weapons returning to standby, communications restoring to their normal frequency. It felt strange, holding a fully functional ship again after experiencing exactly how easily it could be taken away. Captain Core rose slowly from her chair and turned to address the bridge crew, her voice carrying none of the anger I expected, only a tired kind of steadiness that came from having been right about something she had hoped never to prove. "Set a course away from this sector," she said, "slow and steady, no sudden movements. We are guests here, whether we choose to remember that or not." As our ship began its quiet retreat, I looked one last time at the small drifting human vessel on our display, its 3 silent escorts still holding position around it, patient and unbothered, exactly as they had been since the very beginning of this encounter. I understood then, in a way no lesson or warning had ever managed to teach me before, that we had not been rescued from a mistake. We had simply been shown, quietly and completely, why the mistake should never have been made at all. By the time we returned to Coalition space, word of what had happened had already spread through official channels faster than our own report could travel. Dros Kellen was quietly relieved of his position before we even docked, his ambition having cost him exactly what he had once hoped it would earn him. Captain Core received no punishment, her recorded objection standing as proof of her judgment throughout the entire encounter. As for me, I carried something back from that ship that no scan or sensor reading could have measured. I carried the understanding that some warnings exist not because people are afraid of imagined danger, but because they have already witnessed the very real and very quiet cost of ignoring it. Many years passed after that day, enough years that the young officer who once stood proudly on the bridge of the Ashra's Reach had become someone entirely different. I no longer served as a junior officer eager to prove old warnings wrong. I had become a senior instructor within the Coalition fleet, responsible for training new officers before they ever set foot on a survey vessel of their own. My name still carried a small note of quiet embarrassment among older colleagues who remembered the incident, but among the younger recruits, I had simply become the officer who taught Directive Zero with more seriousness than anyone else on staff. I stood now in a training hall aboard a Coalition Academy station, addressing a group of new recruits who looked at me with the same restless curiosity I once carried myself. Among them sat a young officer named Miri Tesk, sharp, intelligent, and clearly unconvinced by the lecture I had spent the last hour delivering. "You keep saying humanity chooses restraint," Miri said, raising her hand halfway through my closing remarks, her tone polite but skeptical. "But how do we know that restraint is not simply weakness, dressed up as patience? If they truly held the power you describe, why not use it openly to secure their position permanently?" I recognized the question immediately, not because I had heard it from other recruits before, though I had, but because I remembered asking myself something almost identical during my first years of service. I allowed myself a small, tired smile before answering. "I asked something very similar once," I said. "Standing exactly where you are sitting now, believing exactly what you believe. Let me tell you what changed my mind." I told them the story then, the full account, beginning with the distress signal that never truly needed rescuing, the calm human voice that warned us before anything happened, the quiet corridors of a ship that had been waiting patiently for exactly the kind of curiosity I brought aboard it. I told them about Owen Hale and the steady patience in his eyes as he watched me make decision after decision that sealed our fate long before I understood the consequences. I told them about Captain Core and the grief hidden behind her calm expression, born from years of experience I refused to respect until it was almost too late. I watched their faces as I spoke, some skeptical, some curious, some already beginning to understand the weight of what I was describing. Miri listened closely, though her expression remained carefully neutral, unwilling to concede the point without further proof. "You said no weapon was ever fired," she said once I finished. "No violence occurred. Does that not prove my point? If the danger was truly as severe as you describe, why did they not simply demonstrate it fully, instead of quietly disabling your systems and letting you leave unharmed?" "Because demonstrating it fully was never necessary," I said. That is exactly the lesson most people fail to understand the first time they hear this story. Humanity does not need to prove their capability through destruction. They simply need to show you, clearly and calmly, that they could have gone further and chose not to. That restraint is not weakness, Miri. It is confidence so complete that it no longer requires proof. I explained further, describing what I had learned in the years since that encounter. Knowledge gathered slowly through careful research and quiet conversations with officers from other species who had experienced similar tests along different boundaries of human territory. Nearly every spacefaring civilization in known space carried some quiet history with humanity, whether through old trade agreements, borrowed technology, or careful diplomatic exchanges that had shaped entire generations of interspecies cooperation. Very few of those civilizations openly discussed what happened when boundaries were tested, because very few of them wanted to admit how completely humanity had chosen patience over dominance, restraint over conquest, quiet demonstration over open declaration. The truth, I told my class, is that humanity built an entire galaxy of quiet trust, one careful interaction at a time, precisely because they understood something most young officers refused to accept early in their careers. Strength does not need to be announced constantly to be real. Sometimes the most powerful thing a civilization can do is remain quiet, remain patient, and simply wait to see who respects that silence and who does not. Miri considered this for a long moment, her earlier skepticism softening slightly, though not disappearing entirely. "And if someone does not respect it," she said, "what then?" "Then they learn exactly what I learned," I said. "Quietly, completely, and without any lasting harm, provided they are willing to accept the lesson the first time it is offered." The lecture ended shortly after that exchange, and the recruits filed out of the training hall, discussing among themselves the story I had shared, some clearly moved by it, others still processing the weight of what it truly meant. I remained behind for a moment, reviewing my notes for the next session, when Miri approached me quietly, waiting until the room had mostly emptied before speaking again. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "That day, I mean. Do you regret what happened?" I thought about the question carefully before answering, because it deserved an honest response rather than a rehearsed one. "I regret my pride," I said. "I regret dismissing warnings from people who had earned the right to give them. But I do not regret what I learned, because it changed how I approach every decision I have made since then. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from mistakes we are fortunate enough to survive." Miri nodded slowly, seeming to accept this answer more completely than any part of the lecture itself. She left the training hall soon after, and I found myself standing alone, looking out through the wide viewport toward the quiet stars beyond, remembering the exact moment I first saw that small human vessel drifting in neutral space, damaged and helpless, exactly as it wanted to appear. Several months later, I was called to a coalition survey vessel for a routine inspection, part of my continued duties as a senior instructor overseeing new crews before their first assignments. Among the young officers aboard that ship, I recognized Miri Tesk, now serving her first active posting, eager and confident in a way that reminded me painfully of myself many years earlier. We were reviewing sensor logs together when an alert appeared on the ship's main display, a small, seemingly damaged vessel drifting alone in a quiet stretch of space between three trade routes. Human design, no visible escort, no visible defense. I felt my chest tighten immediately, recognizing the exact pattern of what I was seeing, understanding instantly what kind of encounter this could become if handled carelessly. Miri leaned forward, studying the readings with obvious interest, a small, confident smile forming at the corner of her mouth. "Look at that," she said, completely defenseless. "We could offer assistance, maybe even gather some useful information while we are at it." I recognized that smile completely, because I had worn it myself once, standing in almost the exact same position, feeling exactly the same confidence, believing exactly the same thing she believed now. I placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and she looked up at me, surprised by the sudden seriousness in my expression. "Let it go," I said quietly, my voice carrying the full weight of everything I had learned since that day, so many years ago. "Maintain distance. Offer remote assistance only. Do not board that vessel under any circumstances." Miri studied my expression for a long moment, clearly confused by the intensity behind my simple instruction. "Why?" she asked. "It looks completely helpless." I looked past her, toward the small drifting ship on our display, remembering every quiet corridor, every calm warning, every patient silence I had experienced during my own first encounter with humanity's carefully guarded restraint. I thought of Owen Hale's steady eyes, watching me make decision after decision that led exactly where he had known it would lead from the very beginning. I thought of Captain Core's grief, hidden behind years of experience I had refused to respect until it was almost too late. "Because it already let you live once," I said finally, my voice quiet but absolutely certain. "A very long time ago, before you were ever assigned to this ship, someone made the exact mistake you are considering right now. They survived it, quietly and completely, without ever fully understanding how close they came to learning a far harsher lesson." Miri's confident smile faded slowly as she studied my expression, searching for any sign that I might be exaggerating the seriousness of my warning. She found none, because there was none to find. "Maintain distance," she finally repeated, ordering the helm to adjust our course away from the drifting vessel, her voice carrying a note of genuine caution for the first time since I had known her. As our ship moved quietly away from that small, silent human vessel, I allowed myself one final look toward the display, watching it grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely from our sensors. I thought of every officer before me who had chosen caution over curiosity, respect over pride, and I understood finally, completely, why that choice mattered far more than I had ever believed possible during my own first encounter with the quiet, patient power of humanity. Some lessons are taught through lectures, some are taught through history, but the most lasting lessons I have come to understand are the ones we are fortunate enough to survive long enough to teach to someone else. And as our ship carried us safely away from that quiet boundary line, I found myself hoping, quietly and sincerely, that Miri Tesk would never need to learn this particular lesson the way I once did.